7, 23 and 24. Did anybody come for a word today? From the New King James Version, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. Before you take your seats, just look at somebody and tell them, take it step by step. You may be seated. A new survey conducted by the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, released earlier this year, has reported that teens, especially girls, are experiencing record high levels of poor mental health. Teenagers all across the board, especially those of color, are struggling. The study revealed that more than 40% of students said that feelings of sadness or hopelessness prevented them from engaging in regular activities for at least 2 weeks of the year. 18% admitted to having made a suicide plan in the past year, and 10% had attempted suicide one or more times in the past year. For a second, I thought that this was just a youth problem, until further studies revealed that adult numbers, especially on the heels of the global pandemic, have been staggering and rising too. And at the root cause of this chronic depression, suicide, hopelessness, and helplessness is this idea of uncertainty and anxiety concerning the direction of our lives. Even more, feelings and a lack of fulfillment in our lives. I then concluded that no matter what stage you are in today, all of us are wondering what tomorrow holds. Whether you are a student, whether you are a teenager, whether you are in college or just graduating college, trying to land a career, whether you are raising children, navigating the balancing act of your profession and personal, whether you are in retirement now, trying to figure out what's next, all of us, if we are honest, have faced that moment where you're wondering, Lord, what do I do next? Not just individually, but you have just concluded a long season as a church. What do we do next? Some probably even dropped off in the process because it is a daunting task to figure out what do I do and how do I navigate this thing called life. It's enough for many folk to just check out. It's enough for many folk to just stay at home. It's enough for many folk to just lose faith and sight of God. It's the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King that gives us perspective on faith. He said, faith is taking the first step. Wish I had a witness here. Even when you don't see the whole staircase. Our faith is not about complete pictures. I know there's some witnesses here that have been there before. I didn't see it all. I didn't know how he was going to work it out. I didn't know how those bills were going to get paid. I didn't know how I was going to afford college. I didn't know how long I would live. I didn't know how I would recover. I didn't know how I would sustain my marriage, but I believed God and I believed him step by step. Tell somebody you ought to take it step by step. One author says, sometimes we make the process more complicated than we need to. We will never make a journey of 1,000 miles by fretting about how long it will take or how long or how hard it will be. We make the journey by taking each day step by step and then repeating it again and again until we reach our destination. I'm so glad I had a grandmama that taught me, baby, you just got to take it step by step. And I dare you to be a good neighbor and tell them, I don't know what you're going through, but take it step by step. Step by step. Our text finds David at a mature point in his life. This is not young shepherd boy David. This is David in a senior and seasoned space of life. How many know that life and time brings about maturity? Even when you don't want to grow, when you've been through some things, you are forced to grow. When you've been through some trials and tribulations, when you've been on the roller coaster of life's up and downs, I know I got a witness today that will testify. Life will teach you some lessons. Circumstances will teach you some lessons. Search processes will teach you some lessons. Going on interview after interview will teach you some lessons. Taking hard losses will teach you some lessons. David finds himself at that space. He says in verse number 25, I've been young and now I'm old. That's how I know that Psalm 37 is rooted in a seasoned and mature David. And David is now at a point of reflection, but he is also at a place of anticipation. He is looking back over what God has brought him through and where God has brought him from, but he knows God is not through with him yet. And so he says, if God could bring me through that, if God could bring me through those days, I have great certainty that God will see me. I don't know who this word is for on today, but I stopped by to tell you, Orchard Knob, that if God brought you through before, he will see you through into your future. There's somebody here today, you don't look like what you've been through. You don't smell like what you've been through. There's a story behind your praise. There's a testimony behind your service, because you know I've been young and now I'm old. He says, but I've never seen the righteous forsaken. That's a good place for somebody to shout. Nor his seed begging bread. You say, Pastor, I don't get it. I'll give it to you the way the hymnologist said, be not dismayed, whatever may be the time. God will take care of you. But you got to take it step by step. David is able to declare, I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor his seed begging for bread, because he had been stepping with the Lord. And I've come to tell you, even on this Youth Sunday, that you don't have to wait until you're old to reach that conclusion. There are some folk that have bulk sense. That is, that God had to allow them to go through and go through and go through, and now now they are saying, if I knew then what I know now, I would be in much better shape. So I don't want to give you bought sense. You ought to borrow some sense and say, I ought not have to climb every mountain that you had to climb. I'm going to learn now that I've got to take it step by step. And fortunately for us as believers, we have a greater perspective, or ought to have greater perspective, on taking step by step. Taking life step by step is not something of a risk or something where you're walking aimlessly or blindly, but according to the text, verse 23 says, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. I'm not ordering my steps, but the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. You see, you can take life step by step when you know that your steps are purposed by God. Somebody shouted, I've got a purpose. I've got a purpose. Somebody ought to lift your hands and say, I thank God for a purpose. I thank God that my steps have been ordered. When you survey that word ordered in the Hebrew, a few words pop up. The first word gives this idea that life is not the way that we have made it with this Western or Greco-Roman context of life being linear. It is this idea that life is cyclical or circular, that life is this cycle. In fact, the word ordered in Hebrew in part is generation. It is God that orders generation. It is God that sets up the cycle of time for man. And you got to know this, brothers and sisters, that God's timing for your life, it may not be the same timing as somebody else's life. And when you look at the studies behind depression in both adults and youth, it is something that has happened in this modern context of scrolling through social media. And we see that somebody is in St. Lucia and somebody is on the beach this weekend. And you saying, I'm stuck in Chattanooga. I wish I was there. You look at somebody that just landed a good job and you say, I'm still trying to figure life out. And what happens is you miss the fact that all of us are on God's timetable. And no matter where somebody else is on the circle, as long as I'm in God's circle, everything will be all right. It is God. It is God. Ordered in the Greek, it denotes that God orders the movement of men. I thought about it on my way up. I told Lady Nisha, I started preaching when I was 6 years old. Never forget that I got my first out-of-town engagement by receiving an invitation from here in Chattanooga. Not Orchard Knob, but I was supposed to come and speak for an MLK celebration in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And guess what? It didn't work out. And now, over 20 years later, I'm right where I needed to be. Yo, what am I trying to tell you? There are some things that don't work out in certain times of your life, but when you trust that God is controlling the circle, you don't cry, you don't have a pity party, but you declare, even if it's 20 years later, I'll get to where. Just high five somebody and say, you'll get where you need to be. Just stay in the circle. The The second meaning of ordered in the Hebrew is this idea that God verbally speaks and it comes to pass. God verbally speaks and it comes. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God spoke. He said, let there be, watch this, and it was. You see, you got something that other folk that don't believe in the Bible have. When you know that God has a word over your life, I'm talking about being purposed. If God said it, that settles it. When God speaks a word, tell somebody there's a word over your life. I wish I had about 15 people that know the word of heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall stand. This idea of ordered is that God doesn't always have to touch it, but if he speaks it, it's got to come to pass. Y'all missed your shout, so let me give you an example of the word that's on your life. He was wounded for your transgressions. He was bruised for your iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and with his stripes I'm already healed. Somebody shout, that's my word. No weapon formed against me shall prosper, and every tongue that rises in judgment shall be condemned. That's my word. And my God shall supply all of my needs according to his riches. I need about 50 people to shout like you know that the word of God tell somebody there's power in the word. So whatever God says, that's the power of purpose. That God has a word over your life. And if he said it, it's got to come to pass. The third understanding that we have of ordered and being purposed by God is the proper arrangement of a thing. That it not just happens in time, that it not just happens by his word, but it happens and comes together in the right way. I want you to know today, that's why you got to trust God's time and hold on to his word, because there's nobody that can arrange your life like God. There's somebody today, you're here under the sound of my voice, and you've seen your life seemingly fall apart. You've seen, hallelujah, you've seen relationships fall apart. It looked like the church would fall apart. It looked like your career would fall apart. It looked like your child would fall apart. But when God orders it, he brings it together and arranges it in the right way, that you will know can't nobody do it like Jesus. Can't nobody do it like the Lord. The final understanding that we have concerning order is this agricultural idea that something is cultivated, that God does not just put me in the right time. It's not that God will just speak a word and leave me hanging. It is not that God will just arrange it and leave it be, but it is God who sustains what he ordered in time, what he spoke in word, and what he arranged with his hand. What am I trying to tell you? That God does not just leave us hanging, but God will see it through to the end. Somebody today in Orchard Knob ought to lift your sanctified hand and testify that God is a keeper. He will preserve. He will preserve. He will preserve what he has. The steps of a good man are ordered or purposed by God. But then he says, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. You see, I can take it step by step with God when I know that my life is purpose. But watch this. I can take it step by step with God when I know that I have God's preference. What you mean, Pastor? See, when God has purposed you, he will put you in his preference. In other words, God's favor will rest on your life. That being in God's purpose will give you sometime what your degree can't give you. That when I've got God's preference, when God is leaning in my direction, when his favor is on my life, I will move ahead of folk that got tenure and feel entitled. I wish I had somebody that can look at your neighbor and say, I've got God's preference. You looking at somebody that's preferred by God. You looking at somebody that's got favor on their life. You looking at somebody that know it's not because I've been so good. It's not because I've been so kind, but because when I look back over my life, I can see his favor. His favor. His favor. His favor. He delights in his way. The steps of a good man are ordered by God. That God gives us purpose. But then God says, I am going to see you through and I'm going to put favor on your life. Now, David knows something, not just about having a purpose from God, but he knows something about being preferred by God. I need my Bible readers now that know that Samuel is now going to Jesse's house, and he's going to Jesse's house because he says the old king is no longer anointed, and I'm getting ready to put my hand on a new generation. I'm getting ready to put my hand on your child. I'm getting ready to put my hand on your grandchild. I'm getting ready to put my hand on your. I'm getting ready to tell somebody God's got his hand on me. He's got his hand, and so Jesse says, I'm so happy to have you here, Samuel. Here are my sons, and Samuel is pouring. He's trying to pour the oil. He's trying to pour the oil, and watch this. Kings are anointed not by a crown but by oil. Anybody know something about having oil on your life? He's trying to pour the oil, and the oil wouldn't flow. Went to that son. Went to the other side. Went to the other side. Hold on, Jesse. The Lord sent me here and said that the king is one of your sons. Some wrong. Well, bro, prophet, I know you ain't talking about him, but I do have another son that I put out there to handle the sheep. Because we in the house don't prefer him, so we put him out. Oh, there's some of you that society and people on your job are trying to put you out, and sometimes even your own family try to put you out, but when man has counted you out, God will take the people that put you out and make them have to tell you, come back in. I don't know who this is for. Maybe you're watching on Facebook today, but I've come to tell you that if God has counted you in, he'll make man adjust his math. Come on in, David. And all of a sudden, because favor is on his life, God says, when I got favor, when favor will rest on you wherever you are. You ain't the supervisor, but you got favor. You ain't got what they got, but you got favor. Favor will bring you in. Favor will bring you in. And what he was anointed for, watch this, he had to trust purpose. But in the midst of an insecure king that had been rejected by God, trying to kill him, trying to destroy him, God gave him favor. Standing in front of Goliath. What no other soldier, they had been at basic training, AIT, they had gotten all kind of promotions. They were at the top of the line soldiers, and David is just a shepherd. But when God's favor is on your life, you will knock down what other folk can't knock down. I wish I had somebody up in here. And he stands in front of Goliath, and they try to give him the new armor. He said, I don't need that. I got this little slingshot, and I got 5 rocks, and I ain't got to use all of them. But this one, God's power got on him. God's favor got in the sling. God's favor got behind the rock. And what didn't work for somebody else, God's favor. I don't know who this word is for, but God said, don't be afraid to try it. If I got purpose for your life, just because others around you are saying it can't work, it didn't work for me, that's the problem. You ain't me. When God's got favor on my life, I'ma be me, I'ma do me, and God'll make it work for. I got God's preference. I got God's purpose. He says he delighted in God. In other words, God says, because of a purpose, as I order your steps, your preference is my preference. That the preference of your life is to be in the steps that have been ordered by God. I want you to know that the safest place in all of the world is in the will. In the will of God. And when you are in the will of God, following in the steps that have been ordered by God, God's favor will rest on your life. And everywhere you go, God delights in his way. In other words, he makes your way prosperous. Wherever you go, you see favor. See, y'all think I'm just talking about money, cars, and clothes. I'm talking about, there are people talking about you in rooms you ain't even walked in yet. That when you get in the room, they'll know your name and you won't even know their name. See, that's influence. That's where God moves you to the front of the line, where God moves you to the top of the list, because you have purpose and you have preference. But can I tell y'all the last thing? And I'll leave. I'll get out of your way. He says, though he fall. Hold on, I thought being in purpose and being in God's preference would mean I'll never fall. No, I can't promise you that you ain't gonna fall. I can't promise you that the road is gonna be easy. I can't promise you that you won't have haters and adversaries. I can't promise you that the enemy won't try to stop you and block you. I can't promise you that your life is going to be peaches and perfection. But he says, though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down. In other words, God will let me trip. God sometimes will let life seemingly fall apart, but it ain't over. Somebody came in worship today and you saying, Pastor, I hear what you're saying, but you don't know. My life looks a little rough right now, but I come to tell you it ain't over. Your neighbor didn't hear me, so tell him it ain't over. Come on, tell him it ain't over. I don't know what you thought was over, but I've come to tell you that it is not over. And how do I know? He shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him, watch this, with his, what? With his right hand. What? Anytime you hear hand of God, that denotes the providence of God. All right. So I can trust God to take life step by step because I'm in purpose. Y'all got my points? I can trust God to take it step by step. Watch this, because I got his preference. But can I tell you the last reason? And I'll get out of your way. You can trust God to take it step by step. Watch this, because you got God's providence. When you got the hand of God upon your life, there's no way you can lose. He said, though he may fall. It's amazing that David remains the apple of God's eye. But David is very notorious in scripture for seemingly falling by the wayside. He becomes king, he becomes king, and looks over the balcony. We're going to keep it G-rated, and y'all know what he did. And even in the midst of that, he remains the apple. Y'all trying to make me go on your boulevard. David falters and goes by the way. He does some stuff that David wouldn't be proud of, and you wouldn't be proud of either. Come on, somebody, let's be real. I'm in church, and I got some stuff I ain't proud of. I got God's favor on my life, but I got some stuff in my past that I ain't proud. I sometimes have gone left when he told me to go right. There's somebody in here today that can say that I'm not here because I've been perfect. I'm not here because I've always been good. I'm not here because I dotted every I and crossed every T. But even when I fail, I had God's providence. And there's somebody that needs to know today that God's hand is not just on your life, but God's hand will get under your life. Y'all missed that. I said not only is God's hand upon your life, but God's hand will get under your life. Hallelujah. Because sometimes the enemy wants you to fall and stay down. But is there anybody here that can look back over your life and testify that when I fell, God, he picked me up? Is there anybody here that know we serve a God that'll pick you back up when others celebrate that you've fallen down? The God I serve will pick you back up. Y'all gotta stop making your testimony pretty. You gotta tell your children, baby, what you doing? I done did it, and I did it better than you. Hallelujah. I didn't trip in everything. I didn't fall in everything. There were some things I just laid down in it. But even in the midst of the things that I did wrong, God's providence was redirecting me to get back where God wanted me to be. Some of y'all act like you don't know what I'm talking about. Have you ever used a GPS and you put the address in the GPS, but then tell the GPS that you know how to get there better than the GPS know how to get there, and you turn the way you think and you're driving on the path you think, and all of a sudden you see on your phone rerouting. and the GPS keeps talking to you, says rerouting, because I'm going to get you back to the right direction so you can get to the intended destination. That's how God is. That even when you make the wrong turn, even when you make a bad move, God says you'll still get there. Some folk will try to cancel you. Some folk will tell you you won't get there. But is there anybody here that know that God will get you to where you need to be? It's been good talking to your orchard knob, but is there anybody that can hop up on your feet and testify today? I've seen the lightning flash. I've heard the thunder roll. I've even felt sin's breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus bidding me to fight on, for he promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. Y'all be blessed. But I've come to tell you that if you trust God and keep taking it step by step, he'll take you where eyes have not seen, where ears haven't heard. Why don't you find you a neighbor? And I want you to link with your neighbor. Come on, I would tell you to shake their hand, but we still in the pandemic, so just link with your neighbor and say, neighbor, I'm not a hater, but I want you to know I see you in your future. Y'all ain't got no neighbor. I said, everybody get up out of your seat and link with a neighbor and say, neighbor, put a little preach in your voice. Neighbor, I see you in your future and you look much better than you do right now. I see you blessed. I see you healed. I see your child coming back home. I see you in your career. I see you with your salary. I see you booed up. I see your marriage being restored. Neighbor, I'm not going to shout for me, but when the preacher counts to 3, I'm a shout for you. 1, 2. Are y'all ready to shout? It ain't for you. It's for your neighbor. 3. Somebody ought to give God praise. And if you got real faith, you ought to just take a step. I wish I had about 50 people that can tell your neighbor, give me room. But I want you to know I'm taking it step by step. Come on, I know y'all trying to be bougie, but if you believe God, you ought to get out of your aisle, move in the aisle, move out of your seat and say, I'm taking it step by step. I'm stepping into my future. I'm stepping into my better. I'm stepping into my healing. Some of y'all still ain't stepping. I'm stepping into peace of mind. I'm stepping on the devil's head, because what the devil meant for evil, God turned it around. Keep stepping, keep stepping, keep stepping. And I think I ought to tell you that David wasn't the only one that kept stepping, but the son of David one Friday kept stepping. They hung him high, stretched him wide. They thought it was over, but early, are we in a Baptist church? Early Somebody, anybody, just keep stepping, because God will see you through. Yeah! Yeah! Come on! Give God glory! Keep stepping! Yeah!